Ashford wasn't a big city with bright lights or heavy traffic. It was a quiet town tucked away in the hills of Virginia, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and knew their neighbors by name. Life moved at a slow, steady pace, and the town had a way of making people feel at home. It wasn't fancy, but it was familiar. That's what made what happened next so hard to believe. At the center of town stood St. Mark's Church, more than just a building. It was a part of people's lives. Families gathered there every Sunday. Kids ran through the aisles after service, and people leaned on it in their hardest moments. Weddings, funerals, celebrations, it all happened there. If you lived in Ashford, chances were St. Mark's had been a part of your life in one way or another. For years, the church had been led by Father Daniel McKinnon, a man who was respected, trusted, and admired. He knew everyone, and everyone knew him. He was the person people turned to for advice, guidance, and comfort. His words carried weight, and his presence made people feel at ease. That's why when Maria Grayson was found dead inside the church, it didn't just feel like a crime, it felt like a betrayal. Maria Grayson wasn't just another face in Ashford. She was someone everyone knew. She had a way of making people feel important, always stopping to check in on neighbors, volunteering at the church, and helping out wherever she could. If there was an event at St. Mark's, Maria was there, making sure everything ran smoothly. She wasn't the kind of person to seek attention, but people noticed her because of how much she cared. She especially had a soft spot for kids and the elderly. On Sundays, she ran Bible study classes, keeping children engaged with her warm energy. During the week, she visited older folks, bringing them groceries or just sitting with them so they wouldn't feel alone. People trusted Maria not because she demanded respect, but because she earned it. That's why when she suddenly disappeared, it sent a wave of panic through Ashford. Maria was the last person anyone expected to just vanish. At first, people tried to stay positive. Maybe she had gone out of town or needed a break. But as days passed with no sign of her, that hope faded. She missed Sunday service, didn't return calls, and her home looked strangely abandoned. The town couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And soon, their worst fears were confirmed. Maria wasn't missing. She was dead. And the place where they found her changed everything. It was a cold October morning when Lisa Carter, one of Maria's closest friends, walked into St. Mark's Church. She had been helping with Sunday preparations for years, and Maria was always there before her, setting up candles or arranging flowers. But that morning, the church felt different, too quiet, too still. Maria wasn't there. At first, Lisa thought she might just be running late, but something about the silence felt off. Lisa called out Maria's name, her voice echoing through the empty hall. No answer. She checked the usual places, near the altar, in the storage room, even outside, but Maria was nowhere to be found. Then, as she walked down a dim hallway leading to a small back room, she noticed the door was slightly open. The light from a flickering lamp barely lit the space inside. And that's when she saw it. Maria was lying on the floor, her body lifeless and covered in deep wounds. The sight was brutal, almost too much to process. Scattered around her were papers, books, and something else, a cross, stained with blood, placed near her body. Lisa barely had time to react before she screamed, a sound so sharp it cut through the silence of the church. Within hours, the police arrived, and what was once a place of faith and safety had officially become a crime scene. Ashford had seen its share of problems, but nothing like this. A murder inside the town's most sacred place? It didn't seem real. The police arrived quickly, sealing off St. Mark's Church and turning it from a house of worship into a crime scene. Officers moved carefully through the halls, taking photos, collecting evidence, and trying to make sense of what had happened. The air was thick with shock. No one in Ashford had ever imagined something like this. Detective Allison Harper was one of the first to take charge. She had worked cases before, but this one felt different. There was no sign of a break-in, no missing valuables, and no clear reason why Maria had been targeted. The crime scene was brutal, but oddly clean, too clean. Maria hadn't fought back, which meant one of two things. Either she knew her killer, or she never saw it coming. As detectives combed through the scene, more questions started piling up. Why was Maria in the church that night? Who would want to harm her? And what was the meaning behind the bloodied cross left beside her body? One thing was clear, this wasn't random. Someone had wanted Maria dead, and they had chosen to do it in the one place where she felt safest. Now, it was up to the police to figure out why. Word spread fast in Ashford. By the next morning, everyone in town knew about Maria's murder. The shock turned into whispers, and the whispers turned into theories. People struggled to believe that someone from their community could be responsible. But if it wasn't an outsider, then who? Some believed it was a random act of violence, maybe a break-in gone wrong. But that theory fell apart quickly. Nothing had been stolen, and there were no signs of forced entry. Others wondered if Maria had secrets no one knew about, something that put her in danger. But to most, that didn't make sense. She wasn't involved in anything shady, and as far as anyone knew, she had no enemies. Then there was the theory no one wanted to say out loud, that someone from the church was involved. Maria was deeply connected to St. Mark's, and she had been killed inside its walls. Had she seen something she wasn't supposed to? Had she trusted the wrong person? The town wanted answers, and for the first time in Ashford's history, people started looking at each other with suspicion. As the investigation moved forward, one name kept coming up, Father Daniel McKinnon. At first, no one wanted to believe he had anything to do with Maria's death. He was the town's spiritual leader, the man people turned to for guidance. But something about his reaction didn't sit right. When questioned by police, Father Daniel was too calm. He expressed sorrow over Maria's death, but he didn't seem shocked. While the rest of Ashford was shaken, he carried on with his routine like nothing had changed. Some called it faith, others called it denial. But to the detectives, it felt off. And then there was his alibi. He claimed he had been in the church, praying the night Maria was killed. But no one could confirm that. Then came the whispers. People started remembering moments when Father Daniel had been unusually strict, his sermons taking on a darker tone. Some recalled how he handled disagreements with an iron grip, unwilling to accept being questioned. And then there was Maria. She had been one of the closest people to him at the church. Could she have known something about him that no one else did? The idea seemed unthinkable, but the more detectives looked into it, the more they started to wonder, was Father Daniel hiding something? Maria's best friend, Lisa Carter, was one of the last people to see her alive. When detectives sat down with her, she didn't hold back. Something had been bothering Maria in the weeks before her death. She hadn't been her usual self. She was distracted, quieter, like she had too much on her mind. Lisa remembered Maria avoiding certain conversations, especially when it came to the church. That was strange because Maria had always been passionate about St. Mark's. But lately, she had been distant, showing up late, leaving early, and skipping meetings she would never miss before. Lisa had asked her what was wrong, but Maria had brushed it off. "Just some things I need to figure out," she had said. Then there was the most unsettling detail. Maria had started visiting the church alone at night. She never told Lisa why, but something had pulled her there after hours. And now, knowing where she had been found, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been troubling Maria had led to her murder. The question was, what had she seen, and who had wanted to make sure she never spoke about it? Just when the investigation seemed stuck, detectives uncovered something that changed everything: Maria's personal diary. It was hidden under her bed, as if she didn't want anyone to find it. Inside were pages filled with thoughts, worries, and something far more chilling. In the weeks leading up to her death, Maria had written about feeling watched. She mentioned a man in the dark who always seemed to be near, even inside the church. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but the feeling never went away. The diary also revealed that Maria had uncovered something she wasn't sure what to do with. "If I say anything, it could destroy everything," she wrote in one of her final entries. One detail stood out the most. Maria had planned to confront someone. She didn't write a name, but she was scared. She knew she had to speak up, but she also knew there would be consequences. Detectives now had a new question. Who was Maria planning to confront, and was that the reason she was killed? As detectives dug deeper, they found something no one had questioned before: the church's finances. St. Mark's had always run on donations, but recent bank records showed something strange. Large amounts of money had been moving in and out of the church's accounts, but there were no clear records of where it was going. Even more suspicious, some of the money had been transferred directly into Father Daniel's personal account. It wasn't just a few dollars, it was thousands. When detectives asked him about it, his answers were vague. He claimed the funds were for church-related expenses, but there was no proof of that. And then they found something even more troubling. Maria had been asking questions about the church's money before she died. Had Maria uncovered something she wasn't supposed to? Was she killed because she knew too much? The investigation had started as a search for a murderer, but now it was turning into something much bigger. There were secrets hidden inside St. Mark's, and Maria might have been the only one who knew the truth. While detectives were focused on the church's finances, another piece of Father Daniel's past surfaced, one that had been buried for years. Before coming to Ashford, he had served in another parish. On paper, everything seemed normal, but when investigators looked closer, they found complaints. Parishioners had accused him of being too controlling, too harsh. There had even been an internal church investigation, but instead of facing consequences, he was quietly reassigned to Ashford. Then came an even bigger discovery. Hidden among old church records was a series of letters addressed to Father Daniel. They were written by a woman from his past, someone who clearly knew him well. The letters hinted at a secret, a mistake they had made together. But the most shocking find wasn't in the letters. It was in hospital records. Father Daniel had a son, a child born years ago, completely unknown to the people of Ashford. The mother had left town, but the connection was undeniable. And the more detectives looked into it, the clearer it became. Maria had found out. Her diary hinted at something she had learned, something that could destroy everything. Had she uncovered Father Daniel's biggest secret? And if she had, was that the reason she was silenced? Just when detectives thought they had uncovered Father Daniel's deepest secret, a new mystery emerged. Witnesses started coming forward, recalling something odd on the night Maria was killed. A man dressed in dark clothing had been seen near the church. He wasn't a familiar face in Ashford, and no one knew where he had come from or why he was there. Then, security footage from a nearby shop confirmed it. This stranger had entered St. Mark's Church the night Maria was murdered. His face was hidden under a hood, but his movements were deliberate, like he knew exactly where he was going. Even more disturbing, the footage showed Father Daniel meeting with him behind the church just hours before Maria's death. They spoke for several minutes, and while there was no audio, the tension in their conversation was clear. Who was this man, and what was his connection to Father Daniel? Had he been sent to silence Maria? Detectives now had more questions than answers. If this stranger had been involved, it meant Maria's murder wasn't just about secrets. It was a carefully planned crime. And the person behind it wasn't working alone. The investigation took a major turn when detectives identified the stranger from the security footage. His name was Stephen Fletcher, a private investigator with a shady reputation. He wasn't from Ashford, and his record showed he had been involved in cases that never made it to court, cases where people conveniently stayed silent. When police finally tracked him down at a motel outside town, he tried to run. That was his first mistake. Once in custody, Fletcher didn't talk right away, but the evidence was piling up against him. Detectives found records linking him to Father Daniel, large payments wired to his account over the past few months. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. Maria had uncovered something big, and Father Daniel had hired Fletcher to handle it. The plan was never to kill her, just to scare her into staying quiet. But something had gone wrong. Under pressure, Fletcher finally cracked. He admitted he had confronted Maria that night, following her into the church when no one else was around. But she wasn't afraid. She was ready to fight back. She told him she was going public with what she knew, that it was too late to stop her. That's when Fletcher panicked. In his own words, she wasn't supposed to die. But she did. And now, there was no denying who was behind it all. It was time to arrest Father Daniel. When police arrived at St. Mark's Church to arrest Father Daniel McKinnon, he didn't resist. He didn't argue, he didn't plead, he just stood there silent. For the people of Ashford, it was surreal. The man they had trusted for years, the man they had turned to for guidance, was now being led away in handcuffs. Some refused to believe it, others felt betrayed, but no one could ignore the truth any longer. The trial was the biggest event Ashford had ever seen. Prosecutors laid out the entire case. Maria had uncovered Father Daniel's secrets, from financial fraud to his hidden child. When she refused to stay quiet, he paid Stephen Fletcher to intimidate her. But instead of scaring her off, Fletcher panicked and killed her. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, phone calls, Fletcher's testimony, it all pointed to Father Daniel as the man behind Maria's death. The jury didn't take long to decide. Guilty on all charges. The sentence? Life in prison without parole. Some in town still defended him, unable to accept that the man who had led their church was a murderer. But for most, justice had been served. The trial was over, but the damage was done. Ashford would never be the same again. The shock of Father Daniel's conviction didn't fade overnight. People in Ashford had spent years looking up to him, trusting him with their deepest secrets. Now that trust was shattered. The town was split. Some refused to believe he was guilty, convinced there had been a mistake, while others felt betrayed, angry that they had been fooled for so long. Conversations that once felt friendly now carried tension, and old friendships started to break apart. St. Mark's Church, once filled with laughter and hymns, became nearly empty. Attendance dropped every week, and donations stopped coming in. The new priest assigned to replace Father Daniel struggled to bring people back, but the damage was already done. To many, the church wasn't a place of faith anymore, it was a crime scene, a place tied to a memory they wanted to forget. Even the town's annual church events, which once brought everyone together, were quietly canceled. For those closest to Maria, moving forward wasn't easy. Her family left Ashford not long after the trial, unable to stay in a place that held so much pain. Those who remained did their best to carry on, but the town had changed. Ashford had always felt safe, like a place where nothing bad could happen. But now, people locked their doors at night. They looked at their neighbors a little differently, and they realized something they never thought possible. Sometimes, the biggest threats don't come from outsiders. They come from the people you trust the most. After the trial, Ashford wasn't the town it used to be. St. Mark's Church, once the heart of the community, became a painful reminder of everything that had happened. Many people stopped attending services, unable to pray in the same place where Maria had been murdered. Some left town altogether, wanting to put the past behind them. Others stayed, but the trust that once held the community together was gone. Lisa Carter, Maria's best friend, struggled the most. She couldn't shake the guilt of not realizing Maria was in danger. She had defended Father Daniel at first, refusing to believe he was involved. Now she had to live with the truth. Unable to stay in Ashford any longer, she packed up and left, hoping for a fresh start somewhere far away. For detectives Allison Harper and Mark Ridgway, the case was over, but the lessons stayed with them. They had uncovered more than a murder. They had exposed the dark side of blind faith and trust. Evil doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, in the places people feel safest. Maria Grayson's story would never be forgotten, and neither would the hard truth that Ashford had to face.